In my career, I specialised in Grand Prix racing, but in the early years of my racing life, I drove a variety of different racing cars. At the beginning, in fact, one year I drove 26 different racing cars in 53 races. It's pretty difficult to find 26 different racing cars in 12 months. But it did give me an understanding of being able to apply myself to different problems of racing. Because if you drive a touring car, that is very difficult. It's a different type of driving than a single-seater racing car or a big prototype sports car, for example. The Jaguar that I was to drive certainly had a pedigree. This same type of Jaguar had won the 24-hour race of Le Mans. The actual car that I was driving at Silverstone was going to be a sprint Jaguar, the type that went for the 1,000-kilometre races. And when I drove it, it was on a great winning streak, winning the World Championship of sports cars and prototypes. Again, I was amazed and impressed by the space inside the car, because, of course, regulations stipulate that the car has to technically have to accommodate 2 people, a so-called passenger, although there are precious few who would wish to travel in that fashion. The car was laid out well, and because it is driven for, in some cases, 24 hours, all the modern amenities were there. There was a proper key, there was a starter on it, the mirror was adjustable and very comfortable. They had electric outside mirrors, pretty tricky for a racing car. But of course, if you think that drivers of different dimensions, perhaps 3 of them per race, have to jump in and out of the cockpit, clearly the adjustments to outside mirrors have to be easily done and altered as the drivers change, as well as changing the seats for the driver. One of the things I complained about as soon as I got into the car was that the floor well of the car where you put your feet was extremely slippery. I always feel as if the driver should have something that he can hold his heels onto without them slipping around. This was not the case, and it's something that I would have wanted to have as a racing driver joining that team. The car also had a peculiarity which I did not like and was later to be embarrassed by. Frankly, the car's head was towards the rear of the car. The car felt not like a mid-engined sports car, but like a rear-engine sports car. The great length and weight of the Jaguars really was based on the engine itself. The wheelbase was very short, but the engine extremely long and extremely heavy. This made the car very sort of elephant-like in the rear end. There's not much footage of me driving this car, and it's all my fault, because I made a mistake. I let the car get away from me. Coming out of a relatively slow corner, I was powering the car with about 750 horsepower underneath my foot, and the car began to slide just a little bit in the rear end. Quite normal for a race car and a race driver. The rear tyre got onto what they call the rumble slip. That's the curbing at the side of the track. Without any warning at all, the car went from a gentle progressive oversteer to suddenly changing direction and going the way that the front wheels were pointing, was in opposite lock. I was trying to correct the slide. Suddenly I was faced with the car rushing across a grass verge and suddenly coming into heavy contact with a bank. To say the least, embarrassing. Because here I had been given this wonderful car by Tom Walkinshaw and Sir John Egan from Jaguars to test and to speak about. This team had immaculately prepared it. They had brought it and done everything they could for me. And here I had really made an error of judgment. I liked the idea of driving the Jaguar. I did drive it. I felt what it was like, but I didn't certainly take the full potential from the car. The car since then, of course, has been greatly changed. The wheelbase has been extended, the engine has been lightened, and I believe the car today would perhaps be much more drivable.